Hi, I'm Michael P. Coleman, Content Director for Brother Be Well. Thanking you for checking out this Parents and Caregiver series brought to you by Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative.
Always so much you bring to the table, Mirella. One of the points you just made reminded me, and I'm certainly not a youth, but of a time when I was dealing with anxiety. And I had made the connection until I talked to first my medical provider, my doctor, and then he referred me to a therapist. I wasn't sleeping. I was only sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night, and I was powering through thinking that that was all I needed. And my doctor was the one that said that could very well be what's contributing largely to your anxiety. You're not getting enough, your body is not getting enough sleep. So sometimes it could be something really basic that can be fixed fairly easily, and other times not. But it's important, as you just pointed out, let's pay attention to everything that's going on and try to get to the root of this thing.
Yeah, and just because you mentioned it, I just want to briefly say one thing that I found out is that, especially because Starbucks and Dunkin' and all the coffee has become really huge, but not even when I was in high school, but caffeine actually contributes to anxiety as well, right? So, like when I mentioned earlier that sometimes people will have, they're feeling restless or they feel that the heart is beating fast. The caffeine does not help that. And so sometimes my students at the high school find that even cutting back on having that large coffee every morning before school helps them easier through their schedule.
Oh,
So it
so
is really interesting.
so powerful and such an easy fix, such an easy fix.
Mhm.
Let's look at depression now. How do we treat depression, and what are the best treatment options for depression for you?
Right. So depression is also, not a one size fits all solution, especially if that, I know we're saying depression, but especially if anxiety or depression is not necessarily being caused by environmental factors, if it's something more chemical. Um, Earlier, I mentioned that sometimes for when someone is vulnerable to their depression, um, that even before it gets to that point, what you can do is notice, listen, and ask. And that still applies for how you treat individuals who you think might be going through depression now. While some of the signs I mentioned earlier are maybe more common everyday things that your friend or the person you know is going through, if you have a gut feeling that something is off, ask them and be straight to the point in asking them. Don't beat around the bush. If they are struggling, believe them, don't minimize or belittle them. And as a friend or somebody who is in their environment, sometimes even just offering to be that support, whether that's, hey, do you want me to just listen? Or do you want me to give you advice or something like that? That is a huge game changer for someone who feels like they are completely alone in this situation. And then just to kind of end off my answer, you also want to look at their routine. Is there something in their routine that is triggering them that maybe they have just gotten, because again, that apathy point where they don't really care, but on some subconscious level, it's actually keeping them stuck in that same season. And so, what I like to do, and definitely anybody can do this, is what did you used to find joy in? And where do you find your content when you come home from work or school or whatever it may be? And how do we slowly start putting that back in our routine to start appreciating it again? It's a difficult question.
Well, you gave a heck of an answer to a difficult question, Mirela. And you mentioned, and I feel like every question I've got to ask for some clarification, so I apologize for this. But you used a term I just really like. I don't know that I've heard you use it before. Notice, listen, and ask. That's an easy kind of, I'm remembering kind of fire drill, stop, drop, and roll, or something like that. That's easy to remember. Notice, listen, and then just ask the questions when you begin to pick up the signs in our youth.
Yes. And that ask piece, I can't emphasize this enough, but people tend to be, I mean, it's a scary topic, but when we're dealing with something like this, be honest in that question. Do not beat around the bush. Say something like, I'm worried about you. I noticed this. Are you thinking about suicide or are you thinking about self-harm? You have to be direct in those situations, right? You don't want to miss something.
You don't want to miss something, and you certainly don't want to have an outcome that none of us wants, and then feel like
Mhm.
if you had only asked the question, maybe things would change. We could if only ourselves to death, but often it's too
Mhm.
late. It reaches a point with suicide where it's too late. So you got to ask when the person's there and they're struggling and they're saying some things. Notice, listen, and ask. I really love it. That's going to stick in my head. I really appreciate that, Mirella. We're talking about anxiety and depression in the COVID era. And at the time of this production, we're moving from a pandemic. We're now told this is an endemic phase of this thing. And that means the virus has pretty much set up shop. It isn't going anywhere anytime soon. It's going to be much like influenza or other health threats that we've learned to manage and coexist with. From your perspective, what are the best ways to protect our children and youth from all of the psychological impacts of COVID? Again, it's not going away. So how do we best help them buffer themselves to what they're going to have to run into?
Yes. So educating the kids on the current events and modeling for the child, the youth, how to keep themselves space, as well as giving them, oh, sorry, how to keep themselves safe, as well as giving them space to voice how COVID has negatively impacted their well-being and asking how they would like to be protected by the adults in their lives. Additionally, understand that the youth are going through just as many difficulties from COVID as you, the adult. Life is not easier for them just because they only have to worry about school, or maybe I've seen a lot of teachers even say that, they got a huge break, right, from having to move strictly to telehealth. That is not true at all. So really be open to communicating with the youth around these subjects.
So powerful. And I think I'm so surprised to hear that. I guess I shouldn't be. But I tend to think just the opposite, that the youth are having a harder time because, again, you and I have been on the planet a little bit longer. So we've learned how to manage trials and tribulations, like the old folks used to say. Young people don't have that skill set. They haven't yet learned how to weather those storms. So we've got to really keep a listening ear to them and help them along. Would you agree?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And it's true that they haven't had like the same trials and tribulations. And I think that's exactly what, teachers, parents, adults are kind of seeing because from their perspective, the adult sees it like, well, they're just not able to hang out with their friends, but they're able to now play video games whenever they want. They're at home all the time. They're not having to go to school. Homework was much laxer in some cases. And then, parents just see it as, I have to give up my time at work. I have to figure out this XYZ. And so a lot of times they forget that they need so much more than just that. It cannot just be good times all the time, right? There's something that is missing from there. And sometimes the adults just see it that way. And you do have to remind them.
Well, that's what this conversation is all about, reminding many adults of what we need to be doing. We talk about topics like this. Some parts of this weren't easy, but you made it easy for us. Mirella Giddings, Associate Marriage and Family Therapist with HearU.org. Thank you so much. And I'm already looking forward to next time I get to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
You take care. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
We touched on with Mirella Giddings for a moment there. We talked about suicide. So we'd be remiss not to give you this resource. There's a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline available 24 hours a day. There's someone on the other end of a phone call for you. If you're struggling, if you need help, if you just want to talk to somebody, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, please. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. I also want to thank our sponsor for this conversation and all of our Parents and Caregivers series. That sponsor is Blue Shield of California, and specifically their Blue Sky initiative. That initiative boosts access to mental health support. You can learn all about that incredible program at bluesky.blueshieldca.com. I'll give it to you again for our podcast listeners, bluesky.blueshieldca.com. One more website, if you can take it, Brother Be Well, our own, brotherbewell.com, for further exploration of physical and mental health topics for boys and men of color, African-American boys, Latinx boys, Native and Indigenous, Asian and Pacific Islander, and we LGBTQIA plus community members that enhance and enrich those cultural communities. All of it's there at brotherbewell.com. Videos just like this one, audio podcasts, print pieces, compelling stories of resilience and recovery, links to resources. Everything's there for you at brotherbewell.com. You can join Brother Be Well for free, so do that right now. And while you're on that site, please sign up for our blog. Just put your email address there in the drop down, and you'll begin to get 2 or 3 times a week notifications when videos just like this one go live on that platform. So check all of that out before you get into whatever you got coming up next today. Brotherbewell.com is that site. My name again, Michael P. Coleman. I'm content director for Brother Be Well. I want to thank you for your time. We don't take that for granted. Thank you for listening in or watching this video. And I want to encourage you to do 2 things before we get to see you again. Take great care of yourself. And we're trying to help you do that here at Brother Be Well. After you get that down, do me a favor, take care of somebody else too. Till next time, bye-bye. God bless.